Hello and welcome back to our social justice talks. After our last segment, we realized we're here with the A-team. Shout out to Stanley. And just in case you missed one of our previous segments, we had our student athletes submit questions for our panel to answer. So we're gonna hop right in. What does a safe space look like to you? How do you create one? And as someone who may not identify as a person of color, what advice would you give them for like entering those spaces and navigating them?
I would describe a safe space.
A space space.
As like somewhere where I feel I can be myself and not feel like I'm judged. Like I can just openly be a Vodney.
Not have to accommodate for anyone else's.
Not feel like I have to silence myself or silence my voice, and feel like I can speak on things that everybody else can speak on as well, and that I'm not silenced just because like I'm a person of color.
Yeah, I'd agree.
As, you know, an advisor, someone who works in athletics, what can I do to help create that space for you?
I think you've done some amazing things,
I think
Donna.
you're the best person at doing it.
Actually, Donna is my mentor. But I think everything that you've done with this committee, because truthfully it started with you. And I think you've helped me as well as you guys as well, that like I feel like I have a voice now, that like you help me uplift that a little bit, because I've always been a little bit shy with like speaking up for myself and speaking up for everybody else that looks like me. But I think you've done an amazing job of helping create that space by you initiated a committee and you said, I want to get our athletes involved, instead of it just being like all of the advisors or all the upper heads doing all the decisions. You said, I want perspective from people that are actually going through it. I want them to have the voice. I think that you basically like you handed us like
the microphone.
Yes, you handed us you handed us the torch to actually be able to do what we're doing. And I think that is another thing that a lot of people can do, that if you see someone that wants to do more and they don't know how to do it, like kind of guide them in like ways that we've been guided.
And like, I know we keep saying it, but joining a committee similar to this one, doesn't have to be this one obviously, like it doesn't have to be a committee, it can just be like a group where you feel that your voice can be heard and you feel comfortable speaking how you want to speak about the issues that you have, without feeling that someone's going to be like, oh, that's not as important as what we're talking about, you know. We in our committee anyway, we talk about everything from like small to like huge, like changing legislation, like the Crown Act, doing things like that big. But then we also talk about just like our own more humbling, like personal experiences that maybe we have on campus, or you know, our own little issues that we have, and no one feels invalidated in sharing their stories. You know, we have people of all different races, all different colors, all different genders, you know, whatever. And finding a community in a space like that is really freeing, I think.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of questions when it comes to creating safe spaces, where how you all talk about the committee being somewhere where you all can talk about anything. They're like, well, me, not actually me, example me, as a person who doesn't identify as a person of color, how do I join that committee without disrupting your space? Like, I still want you all to feel free to have the conversations. How do I navigate that? It's like a question I get a lot of times, and I'm like, I think it all boils down to trust, right? Like, you have to trust that we're a welcoming committee, that we value your opinion, and also trust that we're going to tell you to be quiet when we don't want to hear your opinion as well. And then also back to listening, which I feel like has come up a lot in our conversations. Listening, you can kind of hear in people's tone when you might be overstepping, when it's not your turn, where it's not your space, it's not your time to hold the floor. I think it's a lot what it boils down to.
I also think like asking questions, because if you're just kind of just like saying things and not knowing like, oh, was that the right thing to say? Like if you don't know what the right thing is to say, like you can pull someone aside and say like, hey, I kind of want to talk about this. What's the right way to go about this? Right. Instead of just like jumping into it in a way that it could affect other people.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of fear around saying the wrong things. And I think you just have to be not afraid to get corrected. Like, don't take it personal. Like, take it as a opportunity for growth or a learning experience. Like, oops, I overstepped. I won't do that again. I apologize. People are so scared to say the wrong things that I think a lot of times they don't say anything, which is not a great tactic either.
Yeah.
Join the conversation. Join our committee. So the next question that I have is, how can students get involved in social justice in Albuquerque? How do we know when marches and demonstrations are taking place so that we can join?
For those that are student athletes, join our committee.
Shameless plug.
There's also for people that aren't student athletes, there are a ton of committees like on our campus. And I even talk to people that want to join our committee, and then unfortunately, because our committee is mainly student athletes, I tell them I'm sorry, but I will direct you to people that I work with and our committee work with that are on campus. And I'm not trying to say like we don't want you if you're not a student athlete. It's just that our committee is really focused on like student or our athletic department becoming unified and inclusive. And so we're trying to work with our student athletes a little bit more. Yeah. But you're from ASUNM. You speak.
We have trainings actually for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now we learn about microaggressions and what kind there are, or examples of them, or what to do. So maybe if in someone's organization, you could be the person that says, hey, we should include this. Maybe if there aren't enough opportunities in like someone's community, they could be the person that says, we should try doing an educational segment, a part of our organization. Maybe we should show our gestures to this community by doing this or recognizing this. So whether there's not actually something happening, make something happen. It's not that hard.
No, those are all good suggestions. And I would just add that, just because we do have our committee, we're part of a larger community. So we're part of the campus community as a whole. So we have our ethnic and our resource centers, whether that's African American Student Services or American Indian Student Services or El Centro or the LGBTQ Center or the Women's Resource Center. Just on our campus alone are great places to get involved. And then when you go out into the community at large, you have chambers of commerce and Albuquerque Against Racism and all those sorts of things that people can get involved in to kind of figure out what's going on. We have a chapter of Black Lives Matter, actually, that was chartered this summer, I believe. So there are lots of community and campus resources to also join.
And I think in terms of like protests and things, I don't know, because a lot of protests start from just one person. And I would just say like try and look out on social media, because that's where I found a lot of like where it's going to be, what time. It's just by people sharing it on social media. And even if you don't think you can attend or that you will attend, like I would just share it just so that people that want to and are looking for those things can find it.
Also, one thing I learned this summer with being involved in a couple marches and peaceful protests, I will add, is that they're also very last minute. And most of that is a safety thing, because if you publicize the demonstration and the march, there's a lot of times, everyone doesn't always have your best interest at heart. So those people who are planning to disrupt and disturb will show up. So they don't post information until the last minute. So if you're not connected in those circles, you don't know. There's times where they're like, happening now. And I'm like, oh, I gotta go. And I'm like running out the door. So also just staying connected.
I experienced that in the summer too.
Yeah, you just get it.
I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta go.
No, I would be driving and I'm like, oh. I was like, I see people marching. I'm like, I'm gonna pull over.
Yeah. So again, just staying connected, I think, would be my suggestion. This is a good one. What is the difference between not being racist and being anti-racist? Racism, I guess anti-racism is a better way.
You can say nothing and be not racist. So keeping your mouth shut, not doing anything, like not having an opinion on anything, I guess you're not being racist. But to be anti-racist, you have to be vocal about the things that you don't think are right and be vocal in attempting to dismantle these things that you don't think are right. And I think we've now come past the point where it's not enough to be not racist. You really have to be anti-racist to be not racist, if that makes sense. Like, you really have to be showing that you're doing something, because by being complicit, recognizing what's going on and being complicit with it and allowing it to just wash over you because it doesn't affect you is just as bad, if not worse at this point.
And I would also like to point out that being racist is not just your words.
Yes.
And I think that's something that happens a lot, that someone's like, well, I would never say I hate a black person. And I'm like,
Being racist isn't just a slur.
yeah. I was like, it's your actions. I was like, and truthfully to me, you can say all you want, but your actions speak a million times more than words. Because truthfully, anyone can say anything they want to you, and then they can go behind your back and do something that shows you're like, oh, you didn't mean that, you know?
We did a town hall this summer. I don't know if any of you were on it, but one of our track student athletes actually probably said it the best, is that, your silence is betrayal. So for you to not be racist and not say anything, like, that's a betrayal, because you're not actively doing something to help change. And that really hit home for me. So I make sure I'm not silent. But I thought it was a great way to kind of sum that up.
Yeah, and I think like performative activism plays a big part in that. And just as we're all NCAA athletes, looking at like college football or like big football, majority of the athletes are black. But if you look at a majority of the coaches, they're all white. So you can say like, we're a sport that really supports our black athletes. Look at all of our black athletes that are on the team. But then again, this will be in lots of institutions as well. We hire loads of black people, but who are the people that make the decisions? Who are the people in charge? Who are the people that get to climb up the ranks? Majority white people, minority black people. And that's not maybe explicitly racist, but it's definitely not anti-racist, because you can see that is the power dynamic, and there's no difference there.
It's kind of like the 49ers when they're like, we support Black Lives Matter, and it's like, do you? Or are you just saying it now because it's a trend to you? Yeah,
the irony. Oh, this is a good one. Do you think removing statues and renaming buildings is an attempt to erase history?
No. I'm from Bristol in England, which is where the Edward Colston statue was torn down over the summer. And anyone from Bristol knows that our city was built on slave money. We have a huge harbour there, which is where a lot of the slave ships would dock. So we have 2 schools in Bristol named after Edward Colston, called Colston Girls and Colston School. Lots of our roads are named after him. Lots of our buildings were built on slave money. And it was such a minor part of my education at school. I was lucky in that my school taught quite a bit about it, but I know lots of my friends from Bristol who kind of knew but really had no idea. And that's just Bristol. Like, Bristol's just a city in England. Lots of people in England, maybe you guys probably didn't even know about Edward Colston, I don't know, maybe you did, but a lot of people didn't know anything about what he did, yet I have benefited from the money that he produced from slavery, and I have learned much more about that since the statue has been torn down. And I could say, and I don't want to speak on behalf of lots of people, but I know a lot of people would agree with me. Since that statue has been here, I walked past that statue every day when I would go to school, and I didn't know it was Edward Colston. I knew who he was, but I didn't know that statue was dedicated to him. Since it's been torn down and thrown in the river, I've read so much more about it. There's been so much more information about it. So to have a statue up, that's generally to commemorate someone for something positive that they had done, and that is originally why Edward Colston was erected. But now that we're engaging in a conversation again, because now we know slavery equals bad, that's not good, that we built a city on slave money. In the same way, you can't take away that money that he's injected into our city, but we can start talking about it and recognizing that we don't have to remember him in a positive light by having a celebratory statue in the middle of Bristol for him, but maybe we take that down and put it in a museum, and next to it list everything terrible that he has done for the world, not just Bristol. So I don't think by pulling down statues or changing street names or whatever. We have a huge concert hall named the Colston Hall, which people have been asking to have the name changed, and there was a big argument that we're just pretending that he didn't do it. No, you're just understanding that you don't have to praise him for what he did. We can just have a conversation about it, but maybe give it a name that's less offensive to the people that have been affected by that.
Yeah, I think it's like a part of like remembering that there are 2 sides to it. Yeah. It's not just, he did this great thing. It's like, don't forget all the really bad things that they did. And I think that's a lot of what like you touched on, and I think you put it perfectly.
I think you all touched on it earlier too, that, history is contextual, and it also, it changes. What he did in that time by some was good, and we have grown a lot as a society since then, and we're not diminishing the good things, but we're also remembering the bad. And I think by your suggestion, moving it to a museum and continuing the conversation, like, we still recognize him and what he's done. We're not erasing it. We're just also maybe not celebrating it as well.
Yeah, and we're building more history. Like, it's incredible. The people of Bristol came together and pulled down this huge statue and carried it like across Bristol to the river and threw it in. That's history right there. You're rewriting more history. We don't just have events that happen and then that's it. There's nothing that can be built upon that. Like, that's how we grow and develop and change. And
I don't think erasing history does anything for the future.
No.
You're supposed to be aware of the history and use that in order to create change in the future. Erasing it doesn't do anything for you. Like us just saying, oh, I'm not going to remember slavery. That doesn't do anything for us.
You learn so you don't repeat.
Yes.
Okay. Our next question, I think hearing you all's perspective on this will be interesting because you're still, student athletes and dipping your toe into the working world. But someone asks, isn't diverse hiring practices just reverse racism?
With how much everything has been evolving and organizations are constantly trying to expand kind of like their work roster, as even some coaches might want to do that as well. Or it's not, sometimes it's their main focus, sometimes they're encouraging people of all ethnicities and genders, like how we see on applications, sometimes women encouraged to apply, those of color encouraged to apply. Definitely making sure that your coworkers are exposed to different backgrounds is so important, and often a lot of organizations do it in order to, I guess, save their butts. But I guess in terms of addressing it as reverse racism is really counterproductive in what we're trying to do just as a community. Whether maybe a CEO, they want to try to do something for the community. Maybe wherever their firm is, try to outreach to different areas, try to outreach to different ethnicities, because that's what that CEO can do for the community. It's not so much reverse racism, but more so actively being anti-racist. Those are just some of the things that we can do in order to actively fight racism.
I think sports might be like the best example because you called it a work roster. If I'm a track coach and I only recruit distant runners, that means I suck at sprints. It means I probably don't have a chance to win the 100-meter dash, that sort of thing. So it's making sure that you're meeting the need of your organization is a great way to look at it. So I appreciate that, and I'm probably going to steal that for the next time someone asks me.
For sure.
So our next question says, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, how do events like kneeling and protesting help your social justice cause?
For the example of kneeling, it started one of the biggest conversations of our decades, I believe, because it starts out as an argument, but for us to redirect it as a conversation at our homes, at our dinner tables, is where really change happens, like in here. And then that recognizes like the issue as a whole, and people who are upset at protests are probably going to be the same people who are upset at kneeling during the anthem. People who are upset about the protests being violent, it doesn't really look justifiable when they're upset about someone peacefully kneeling. It just means that there's a deeper problem. I think that these gestures really symbolize certain things, and it's genuinely to start the conversation, whether it's a t-shirt, somebody's I guess like sport wear before like they warm up or something. It starts a conversation, and that's really what it's about. And then protests obviously are more active. They show more emotion, whereas different types of gestures you can just do in terms of showing support or being an ally, and it kind of makes it, like we talked about, a safe space for people of color, because then it shows kind of, hey, you're welcome here. And it's unfortunate that we have to remind certain people of certain color that, hey, you're welcome here. Why are we still having to have, reminding people, by the way, I support you, that you're Black? Some of those little gestures, it's unfortunate that, we do have to do those things in order to show our support, that we're still having to do that. But those are little things to show support and also start the conversation.
I think you were spot on in the fact when you said that, the kneeling, the protesting, all of that is symbolic. It's the first step. It's to get the conversation started. And then the conversations that you're having at your dinner table, or that we're having right now, or that I'm sure you've had in your team, with your team or with your friends, is the actual win. And then we get to win again if action happens after that. If we can change a policy or we can change a legislation. But one of the biggest wins to me in this fight is just the conversation, and having conversations with people I never thought would come and knock on my door and be like, hey, Dad, can I talk to you? And I'm like, yeah, about what? And then we end up talking for like 2 hours. Like, that is the win to me, and that's what I celebrate, and that's what I would keep pushing and like fighting for. I'm so sad I don't want to say this, but this is our last question. How can students get involved or show their support for the Social Justice Committee here at UNM?
If you want to join, reach out to any of us. Like, send us a message. Like, join. Again, like, you can show your support by watching this, and then, as we keep saying, bringing the conversation, or things that maybe you didn't agree with everything we're saying. We don't expect everybody to, but like, take that to your friends and have that conversation and start a conversation with your family about it. That's not explicitly supporting our committee, but you're at least doing what we like are so desperate to do, is get everybody talking about something that maybe you've had the privilege of never having to talk about before.
And even like kind of what you touched on, if there are things that we talked about that you don't agree with, like, we would love to talk to you about it. Like, we are trying as a committee to have these open conversations, and we want to have those with you. And that's why we wanted to have this survey where you guys can ask us these questions and we can give you feedback from our perspectives, because our perspectives are not other people's perspectives. But that's the point of having these conversations. And I would also add just like sharing things that we're trying to get put out there. Like, I think that's one of the things we've struggled with the most, is like getting out there on social media and having people be aware that we're doing all these things, especially now that like our committee is broken up into so many bits and pieces, and we did that purposefully. If there are people that really just want to focus on one thing,
inclusivity.
I wanted to get more people involved that are really passionate about gender equality, and we actually got more people one that I was like, let's split everything up. They're like, oh, I really like that, I want to join that. And like, if you are really interested in that, just email me or Dada. And
pop quiz. Can you name all of our subcommittees that people might be interested in?
Yes.
Go.
Race and ethnicity, gender. Oh, should I say all the people that are running it? I'll do that. So race and ethnicity is run by me and Adora. And then we have our gender committee, which is ran by Brianne Tuck. And then we have LGBTQ, which is ran by Paris Dalton. Change your last name. And then we have community service and outreach ran by Gwen Malley. And we have mental health that is also run by me and Sarah Lucero.
And you have a subcommittee of race and ethnicity law enforcement, right?
Yes. And that is me and Adora as well.
There you go. Well, again, I wanted to take the time to thank our student athletes for submitting these questions. We know it's really difficult to ask these race-based questions, and it can be a little intimidating. So thank you for taking time to submit these questions for our panel to answer. Thank you for all of you out there that took time to watch this. While this might be the end of our conversation, we hope you go out and continue it. Go Bows.